Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with? Okay, so it took you reading the Bible to realize that those things were bad for you?
Yeah, it actually did. I
Couldn't
didn't
figure this out on your own?
No, Ted Bundy could be redeemed. God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Yahweh sets up a whole system in the Old Testament where you slaughter animals just so he's able to forgive you.
Today's special guest is Catholic author Matthew Mcwhorter. Welcome in, Matthew Mcwhorter.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here. God bless.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Matthew.
Yeah, so I am retired. I'm a retired lawyer, and I was named. So my full name is Matthew Mark Mcwhorter. I was actually named after the first books of the New Testament. So I have a name after the Bible, but not really raised religious at all. So late in life, I have major medical problems and retire young. And I just had a bucket list. And on the bucket list was read those books I was named after. So my first discovery, I go on Amazon and realize there's a million Bibles out there. Which one is supposed to be the real one? Second is any of this true? I'm asking myself, I have a vague idea of what I'm about to encounter. And I'm like, well, is any of this true? So I start piling up all those Case for Christ books on the one hand and all the skeptical and other arguments on the other side against it. And I just start a massive reading project of reading through this. It took me years. I bought all these different translations and different versions of the Bible. So I was reading like Matthew chapter 1. That took me a full week because I read it across all these translations. And, so it's 5 years to read the New Testament. It is years of looking into, is this true? Should I believe this story, etc. And because of this background that I'm in, I don't have a church trying to pull me in. I don't have, there's no person trying to argue me. I have the question of, is it true? And what is the right Bible at the exact same moment? And I realized there is something that no one else had focused on, which is that there is a type of Christian whose belief system defeats their case before they ever get to trial. That's me as a lawyer, just looking at this saying, you guys cannot even, summary judgment is going to get you thrown out long before we get to a trial. And that's the point of my book. So everything else of my journey from there, we'll talk about in a little bit. But this book is at this very early stage of saying, I don't know who wins the case for Christ, but I know who can. And I'm staring right at you. So that's the point of the book, is to show people what I saw and why and walk through it. Because I think what happens is that skeptics are arguing against God and religion, and that's too big. This is a case. You got to narrow down and focus on your opponent and what he's saying. I think the Christians who don't agree with these people are sort of seeing this as just another piece of hypocrisy, which kind of true. But in this case, they're not hypocrites. They're saying their own evidence is no good. That's orders of magnitude worse. They're bringing this case, and then they themselves don't quite realize that they have this problem. They're not like imposters who know that they're pretending to be the other Christians. They don't realize it. They don't focus on the fact that this evidence doesn't say quite what they want it to say in every respect. So what happens is, if you ask them the right question, they will tell you that the evidence they just presented is terrible. So that's the key to my book. It's called Canon Crossfire: Does the Protestant Bible Blow Up the Case for Christianity? Because that's what happens. There's a type of Protestant who loves this case for Christ, is telling everybody else, you should follow this evidence and change your worldview. But if you go through the effort, as I did, of pulling that evidence out, reading it, looking at what it says, you would realize that on that evidence are these books that they don't accept. They're not found in the Protestant Bible. They are found in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. This isn't all Protestants. Protestants is a label for a diverse group. There are Protestants who are more accepting of these books, more understanding of what I'm about to say. But there are Protestants who truly believe that their Bible is the original Bible, and that all of these extra books were added by mistake. They are the ones saying that the evidence that proves the New Testament cannot be trusted because it also, in their mind, proves the wrong Old Testament. So they are saying that the evidence cannot be trusted, does not prove that the apostles taught these books. That's the point I'm making. They don't quite understand it because if you start asking them, they'll say, well, that was just a mistake. Well, yeah, but let's read what this guy said. What he said is this is the list of books that we got from the apostles. A, he's wrong. You're right. He's mistaken. Okay, I heard what you said down here. But B, he lied. He's not mistaken like in a conceptual fashion. You are saying that your witness's testimony is a lie.
Mm.
You're in way bigger trouble. And that's what I'm walking people through in the book. I want to stress a couple things. This is kind of a technical piece. Not everybody's interested in this, but this kind of Protestant is the one who brought the case, right? They are the ones who hand you Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, especially if they hand you Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which is a book piling up the evidence that actually doesn't result in their Bible. You walk through his evidence as I do it. My book is really intended to be a companion volume. Yes, sir. I love the Case for Christ. Let's look through the evidence and walk through it and say your Bible is garbage. That's the point of my book, is showing that evidence. I pulled that out. It takes an awful lot of work. You got to start with what they say, the evidence that they're quoting. You got to go find all that evidence, look at it yourself, pull it out, then pull out what the Protestant says when he's debating with Catholics about the right Bible, pull in those quotes. It took me years of effort to assemble all this, but it is assembled. And the last thing I want to say, or last two things. Number one, this is not a straw man. I'm not arguing with a little old lady in the pews and ruining her life. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I start, and I have a free preview on my website, canoncrossfire.com. Free preview in 10 pages. You would get the point. The book goes on for 550 pages to convince Protestants of what I'm saying, not to convince skeptics or neutral judges. I took on their best scholar. His name's Michael Kruger. He's a professor on the canon. He wrote, as far as I can tell, the best-selling book defending the Protestant Bible. And he became the dean of one of the largest seminaries in the United States. In 10 pages, you can look at the preview. His book says that his case is awesome and wins as long as the early church did not accept bad books. That's what he says. That's not me. I'm telling you what he says. He recognizes the problem, and he then cites 10 witnesses that he thinks prove that the early church never accepted any bad books. I show you that all 10 of them accepted at least one book. 9 of the 10 accept another book, and the 10th guy acknowledges that it's a unanimous view against him. He just ends the unanimity. The evidence is overwhelming. It can't really be argued with it. This guy just kind of forgot it. And he cites to these witnesses. That is their best scholar citing to his best evidence and embarrassing himself. And I show it in 10 pages. Like, it's not hard. The reason for the book is to go through and convince a Protestant to change their mind. That's not a simple point made one time. That is the same point made 100 times. That's why the book's 500 pages. That's why I'm going through it. And I will say, I hired Protestant marketers. I hired Protestant editors. I hired Protestant proofreaders, hired Protestant focus groups. All of this is directed at them. Nothing but 5-star reviews to this day. Not one person has read the book and not liked it. As far as I know, not one person has read the book and not understood the point and changed their mind. I have Protestant after Protestant arguing within their own church for changes in their Bible based on it, etc. It is making an impact. However, you do need that kind of Protestant who loves this case. If you know that kind of Protestant, please get them my book. You will enjoy it. That's the point I'm trying to make to you skeptics. You and I might not agree on everything else in the world, but on that point that this is pure fun, give them my book. Because the last thing I'll say, my book has steady sales as an academic book, which means very low sales, throughout its entire history until Black Friday. All of a sudden, all these Catholics that I had been talking to for months realized that they had the perfect Christmas gift for that kind of Protestant. And they all went out and bought my book and gave it to them. The book explodes over Christmas. It's not a Christmas-themed book. It's detailed scholarship. But, man, they loved giving it to him. You might like that, and that's why I recommend it to you. So that's why I'm here today.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. Thank you
Sorry
for
for
that,
the long
Matthew.
exposition, but that's
No,
just
you're
trying to
good.
explain the book. As I say, you don't really need to read the book. You can read the free preview.
Yeah.
But if you enjoy kicking somebody over and over, then buy the book. You would enjoy it too. So it's
That's an interesting way to put it. I like that.
yeah. It's
uh,
I even my friends like I've the other thing I'll say, yeah, I you can mock my legal abilities if you wish, but
mm,
I knew some of the best lawyers on the planet and they owed me favors, so I made them read my book and make sure I wasn't about to make a fool out of myself before I
mm,
published it, right? And they all agree with me, whether they were Protestant, skeptic, Catholic, doesn't make any difference. It's an
uh,
easy case. But my most recent feedback from one of them was from one of my old bosses who said, "My God, this is a horrifyingly difficult read." But that's because he's also retired. He was looking for summer beach reading. That is not my book. Yeah, but
no, sounds like you
yeah.
need a couple books to compare with it and go alongside with. It sounds like
Exactly.
fun.
If you know those books, if you've read Case for Christ, if
Mm,
you've read Josh McDowell, this is meant to be the companion volume of saying you guys failed to complete your case. You had to complete the research. You might have proved Christianity, but you didn't prove your kind of Christianity.
mm.
And anyway, I found nothing but fun out of handing it to those people and talking to them. So
That sounds fun. Thanks for
yeah,
that. As far as your version of Christianity,
yep.
where did we come upon this? How did you come upon your version?
Yeah, so as I say, I just start reading the Bible and reading 100 Bibles all at once, reading all of these different commentaries. I quickly saw this problem that I identify in my book, but it's actually, as I mentioned, it's kind of a piece of a bigger problem, which is how inconsistent a lot of the Protestant argumentation is. So I very quickly, the case for Christ type of analysis became, is Catholicism true or is skepticism true? Like I had narrowed it down pretty quick. And from that point, if you're asking me about this case for Christ concept, I would say that it's a fine concept. It proves something. It doesn't prove a whole lot. It doesn't get you very far in the analysis. It ends up being a much more philosophical, theological thing. I
Mm,
ended up deciding Christianity is true and going on from there. But that's more of an in-depth discussion of God and the universe and
mm.
were we created and is there
Well,
a design and all that stuff, right?
you had mentioned that you weren't raised in the church, correct?
No, not at all. My mom she had gone to so I was named after the Bible. My grandfather had been Catholic, had sent my mom to Catholic schools. The nuns were mean to her, and so she named me after the Bible to make Grandpa happy, and never said another word about it, as far as I can remember, for the rest of my upbringing. So I really had a dim understanding of even what Christianity was. I mean, like you grow up in a Christianized society, you hear things, but that's all I
Yeah.
knew. And I never met anybody who tried to prove Christianity to me or anything like that. So it was just I was in a complete black box of what is this stuff, right?
So how did we get from the black box to Catholic?
Yeah, so like I said, first off was that I took this case element seriously of if you're going to try to prove to me, because the case is trying to show that Christianity goes back to a real person and is his real preaching, right? And as I
Mm,
say, as a historical matter, they might be. I think they can prove that. I just don't know
mm.
what that gets you. All you've shown to me is that you have a cult. Congratulations. Like that isn't
Yeah,
enough to convert somebody. That gets into the
right.
theology, the philosophy. So I was reading the Bible, as I say, across
Mm,
all this stuff as an outsider coming to it, I found a whole lot of explanations of the universe and human conduct that to me, I felt was explaining, like the original sin, sort of
mm,
explaining how people are flawed in a way that I don't get out of the more skeptical things that I was reading in life, the sort of plain vanilla pop
interesting.
psychology. I come from an economics background where everything is self-interest, right? The number one thing I took away from my economics education is that economics is stupid because people are really bad at finding their self-interest. And but so much like biology is all about the selfish gene, right? And
Mm,
propagating the species. Like I find a whole lot of not propagating the species going on. Uh, you know, even among skeptics, et cetera. There's an awful lot of birth control being used by people. Is that really the explanation for human behavior, et cetera? That's where some of my,
mm.
like maybe Christianity explains it better attitude came in.
I like that. So explanation for human behavior.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting to me. So the original sin, flawed people, this to you is a best explanation for the human behavior.
That's for me, that's the best that
Yeah,
I've seen. I
that's
like when I
interesting to me.
when I look into it, when I see, like I say, I just see people who can't see their self-interest 3 inches in front of their face, right? I hear, the marketplace of ideas, and but from the same people screaming and yelling about the actual marketplace of ideas going on in the world. That seems
Yeah.
to be making us stupider,
Uh-huh.
rather than smarter. I hear, just these things. It's like if you start thinking about it, I try to say like I'm skeptical of the skepticism.
There
Like
you
it's
go.
more that I hear these explanations and I'm like, well, is
Hmm.
that true?
Yeah.
And I start wondering, and that's what kind of led me down this. I certainly am not the kind of Christian who says I never have doubts and I don't wonder, right? I wonder all the
Hmm.
time.
Good. Good.
But
Yeah.
I usually end up at the end convincing myself again that it's true and going back. But,
Interesting.
good days and bad.
I gotta know what convinced you about the flawed people, the explanation for humans being that original sin story. I guess we should probably. What do you believe about the original sin story? Do you believe the whole thing, or is it an allegory? Is it an analogy?
I'm more in the it's we don't understand it, right? It's an allegory that we know, like I'm in no way a science denier, right? And
Hmm,
so I'm not into the 6,000 year Earth and that kind of stuff.
good.
But it is sort of we don't understand the story. It's an allegory.
Yeah.
It's something that was passed down. Did
Yeah.
it come from, to me, is it a man-made allegory or a divine allegory is really where I would come down on it, right?
Hmm.
Like it's one of those. And which is it?
Well, I don't think it's any of them, and I think it's really weird that you seem like a rational person here. You're logically thinking a lot of this stuff through, but we're stopping to me, sorry, no offense.
Yeah, no,
I feel
no,
like we're
yeah.
stopping here with this original sin idea. That's why I feel we're that rationality and that logic is just kind of putting a halt on that for some reason.
So if you go to quantum mechanics,
Oh,
the every quantum mechanics person would start off by telling you that if you think you understand quantum mechanics, that is evidence that you have no idea what you think you understand,
hmm,
right?
hmm,
But the point is it works. So our science
hmm,
accepts a story because it works. The math works, it works, it works, it works. We don't really understand it. It's hard for the human mind to wrap itself around
hmm.
this concept. That's what they're all telling me on their science. I don't necessarily find it all that illogical to say that I have an allegory that explains the world and it works.
It
Um,
does it work though? Does it
I
work though?
I think so, yes. I
Let's go with
see
the idea, the concept of it. We've got an all-powerful, all-knowing God, correct?
uh
Oh,
yeah, I would say you can sort of start down this road without believing that yet, right? Like I
hmm.
agree with you that that's where it all ends and that's what the allegory begins with, etc. But the concept of original sin is really we are deeply flawed in some way
Well, who made
and in
us?
in the particular way. Exactly. That somebody made us that somehow we are flawed or, the
Right.
skeptical view that nobody made us. And
Well, deeply flawed. I don't think we're deeply flawed. I think humans have their issues, and it's all part of the evolutionary ladder going up there and realizing, learning things along the way. We definitely didn't start off smarter. We started off on the lower end of our smarts, and I don't think a lot of us have made it any higher, but some of us have. Comes
yeah,
with that rational, logical thinking there.
well, but rational logic is not a new invention.
No, but we're
Most of
using
the
it better, I
progress that you're
feel.
talking about is in very uh, specific scientific categories.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, if you look at, say, medical technology, et cetera, like we have certainly advanced in the last 100 years, but life expectancies have not really advanced. They
Hmm.
did an enormous advance from fixing a couple of minor, not minor, huge, but basic problems.
Yeah.
Once they fixed that, the progress has slowed down. Technology seems to have slowed down in many areas. Um,
Oof. That's debatable.
eh,
That's that will have to
no, no,
each like
no.
individual there. But yeah, uh,
Exactly. No, no, no. It certainly is growing in information technologies, et cetera. Has it grown in battery technologies and basic engineering and
some
that
I
sort of
think we
stuff?
have improved some of the battery,
It
the energy
is, but
storage
I
and
would say
whatnot.
that
But
like my view of the world is that we've gone through some spurts, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And we've recently seen them, and that's giving us blinding us to the fact that we're still the same dumb human beings we always were. When you're talking about logic or rationality, because that's
Uh,
thousands of years old. That's not
emotionally
new.
run.
Yeah, you can read Plato and Aristotle, you can read, the medieval scholastics debating logic, etc. Like that's not none of that's new.
So let's say that is true. That's a deep flaw in the human
Yeah,
psyche here. We have a deep flaw. Now, to me, I would just chalk it up to an evolutionary flaw there.
yeah.
But for some reason, you are doing it, or you're chalking it up to this invisible deity guy creating things this way, correct?
Um, yeah, again, yes, ultimately. I don't know
Ultimately,
that the
yeah.
concept
That
requires
ultimately
that,
is where I
but
want to go
yeah,
with it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Essentially, what
I'm a
God did.
lawyer. We constantly debate specifics, but in
Yeah.
philosophy, you keep going broad. So I understand. Yeah.
But if he's the one that created this thing and he created it in a specific manner to be a certain way, is this not all of his fault? Is he not the flawed creature making the flawed creatures?
Uh, to the extent that you view that as blameworthy to him, yes. But the idea that he created something and he gave it free will, for example, and allows it
Mm,
to spin off in a bad direction is not necessarily a flaw on him any more than you giving birth to a child who, may go off in a bad direction. Like you didn't mean it to end that way, but because you accept that your child has the right to make decisions, you
mm.
accept that that might be the consequences at the end, right?
Yeah, but I don't know every decision my child's going to make through life. And I'm also not the one tweaking different attributes in somebody to have them feel different ways or think different ways. And if God is God, then he is the one doing those specific things for specific reasons. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing these things. So I'm very curious where the free will idea comes from, because I don't see that anywhere in the book.
As believing in free will or not believing in free will.
As in, God gives us free will.
Uh, No, I see it throughout the book. Yeah, that this is actually there is a type of Calvinist who does not believe in free will among Christians, but Catholics and others do believe in free will. That
Right, I
God did,
understand that, but I'm
yeah.
curious where you're getting that idea, though. Like, can you point to a specific verse that says, "Hey, everybody gets free will. I, God, will leave you alone."
Uh, well, I mean, again, the Bible throughout it is asking you to make a conversion, right? And asking you to make a choice. That
Well,
is the free will.
I see the opposite. I see the opposite. I see
Yeah,
God interfering and intervening consistently throughout the book, and then just
and
one
I
verse right
I
off
am
the. Go ahead.
disagreeing with you on my view. Again, the Calvinists would agree with you. They would say that God has chosen who's going to make the right choice, right?
That's what I
Um,
see through the Bible, and
yeah,
I see God manipulating people throughout the Bible to make His will be done, not their will be done. Proverbs 21:1: the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord; he turns it wherever he will.
yeah,
That, to me, is a very strong case against free will.
yeah. If you're the king, that's a specific example where God chose to do that, right? That
Right, but that
doesn't mean
doesn't
that He
mean
does
everybody
that
has
all the
free will,
time.
though.
Exactly, I understand.
Yeah.
At certain times, I mean, we would say, any Christian who believes in the divine inspiration of Scripture would have to say that God was there with the pen, right? That
Yeah.
is and then you run into, well, is that God controlling the pen? Is that God allowing the pen? And that's where the Catholics get into the it's not that God controls you, it's that he prevents you from error. It's infallibility. He stops the error from, so he sort of sets the boundary over here, but he lets you
Does he
go off in
though?
that other direction.
That's not biblically accurate. Ezekiel 3:20. When the righteous man turns from his righteousness and does evil, and I put a stumbling block in front of him, he will die. I mean, he caused the error. God causes the error. God is the one that puts the error into the system and then then gets mad when people err.
He allows there to be such error. That is
Uh,
true. But he has still given you the free will to make the choice.
ah, so what is free will to
Yeah.
you? Let's define that. I'm just curious.
Well, again, I do have a philosophy degree before my law degree. So before you get to free will, you got to start. Do you exist? Right? Are you an illusion or do you really
I have
exist?
no idea. Yeah,
Is there
I
really
don't know.
something? And yeah, and you know, when I say that I came to the Bible late, I did come to the Bible late, but I had already found annoyance with discussions over free not free will, but of over the will, over the existence of that I inside yourself.
Hmm.
I am of the view that it, you know, it's self-evident, I guess, that it exists, and I find the philosophical discussions about it annoying. That goes back to listening to all that in college, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But so you have a first discussion of, do you exist? If you exist, what does it mean to exist without free will? Are you just a consciousness watching a
Hmm.
movie? Like, are you, what are you that is you if there is no free will? And
Hmm.
I just don't see that. I see free will.
I see a
So,
mind that is easily manipulated by outside influences, so
oh,
that takes away my free will. Because my
no,
definition I use is
yeah.
the Cambridge Dictionary. It's the ability to decide what to do independently of any outside influence. And McDonald's commercials are an outside influence that convince people to do things. I mean, then God throughout the Bible intervenes in people's free will to make them do things or not do things or die.
Yeah.
Just yeah, he sends prophets to lie to a king so he can go
But
kill the king. I
you're
mean, there's all
making
kinds of stuff in
you're
here.
making an exclusive final determination of all aspects of free will and saying there's nothing. So there's absolutely
Hmm.
nothing from outside yourself that you could resist and change your mind to do. Like, to
No, I'm
me,
not saying there's nothing, but
there is
there are
still a
things that
core, there's still
yeah,
I agree 100%.
yeah,
Human beings are subject to all sorts of outside influences,
uh,
100%. But there's still an inside influence. There's still something inside oneself. I
hmm,
myself know that I am, tempted to do certain things and don't do them. I restrict myself from doing them. I know
hmm,
society is asking me to do something. I resist that. Like, where is that coming from? Um, whether when it was me as a child or me as an adult, that's coming from inside me. I believe there is something there
hmm.
that has at least some control over the events that I put myself through. There's events that I don't put myself through, like being born in the first place. But there are events that I can control, and I
Hmm.
exist. I can control them.
Right. What about the ones you don't know you're doing because you're being controlled by an outside influence? Let's just say you're
They
hungry
exist.
and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, no, no. And like, if you asked me where doubts and stuff started arising, I
Mm,
so I
mm,
my background, I skipped school and my career was accelerated and all this stuff. So all my peers are way older than me. I am watching people stop being themselves, right?
mm,
From mental deterioration, dementia, other
mm.
stuff is like that person I knew is gone.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, if you're asking me to understand what's going on, that's where the
Mm,
questions start arising. But as long as we're talking about sort of healthy human beings in basic, you certainly could have been born a slave or killed the first day you were born, etc. Like, bad things can happen. But
yeah.
if you put a sort of framework on it, I still think there is a core there that is the individual and able to resist
Mm,
that stuff and able to be himself. Whether I'm right on
mm.
that, well, that's why doubts come and go. But to
Yeah.
me, I
Well, that's
see
fun.
an individual there, and I see myself in control of things, just not in control of everything.
Is God in control?
I think we are misusing the term when we talk about God, with his knowledge and his control, that we're anthropomorphizing it, kind of like we do with the computers and these
Mm.
AIs and stuff. Is it really thinking as it spins something out, that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. It's a big question. It's not thinking like us,
Mm,
is the point. And I don't think God thinks like us, and I don't think God's control is like we think of control of individually doing it. I think it's
mm,
again, we think of things a lot of times in the modern world as a machine. I think of it, maybe the old way of thinking of it was better, which is as a garden. God is a gardener in control of all this stuff. He wants all the plants to grow, but
mm,
there's things going on in the garden, and everything's
mm.
allowed to grow in its own direction and do it its own way. I think that garden metaphor works better for me than the machine metaphor that moderns seem to use.
But doesn't a gardener control his garden?
Not
Takes the
completely.
weeds out,
Not
gives the food where
completely.
needed.
Exactly. A whole lot, but he's still like, there's 10 different, again,
Mm,
anthropomorphizing. You plant 10 different seeds of corn,
mm,
they grow into 10 different heights. Like, you can only do so much of control. I think it's the same with God, in a sense that he has relinquished control and he is allowing things to happen. He could control it if he wanted to, but he's not. He prefers to garden rather than have a machine of, a robotic machine. That's how I think of it.
mm.
Um,
Interesting concept.
yeah.
as a gardener, though, and if I had the knowledge of God as a gardener, my plants would be amazing.
Exactly.
Just saying. Just saying.
And gardening in a controlled environment in your house works a lot better than farming in Iowa, right? Like there's
Well, yeah,
different,
well,
if you can get that level of control, it can work a lot better. But
well, that doesn't make any sense why God would do that then. Why God would not have a more controlled system? It doesn't make any sense.
because he wanted people, he
He
didn't want
wanted people to
robots.
suffer.
He wanted people. The
Oh,
suffering, I think, is a element of the system, right? He created a
the
system to
system that he
generate.
created.
Yes, but he created a system to create people, not to create robots. And so he
Well,
wanted a consciousness, he wanted a soul, he wanted something other than himself to exist. And
hmm,
that comes, sort of in, I'm pretty sure it's Einstein. In fact,
hmm.
it is definitely Einstein. He says at some point, somebody asked him, "Does God exist?" And his question was more of, does God, the real question is, did God have any not whether God created us, but did God have any choice in the matter? Like if he was
Mm, mm.
creating us, how much the, what are the limits to all powerfulness, right? And I think the concept is that he wanted separate conscious, separate soul, and therefore he was willing to create something that has problems with it in order to have that. But if he created something that didn't have it, he wouldn't really be creating a soul, he'd be creating a robot.
Well,
And
that goes to heaven. Like, what is in heaven? Aren't we all just robots in heaven? God wants us, it's slaves in heaven, essentially. So, do we
yeah,
have free will in heaven?
you have surrendered the will to God with as part of going to heaven, right?
So, there's no
That
free
you
will in heavens. So, you got a bunch of
exactly.
robots.
Well, no, if I offered $1 million to everyone listening to this show, I believe every single person would accept the $1 million, right? You have free will. You don't have to accept it. But if I offer you $1 million, I kind of know what your answer is going to be,
Hmm.
as a gift, right? No strings attached. Just take it. You still have free will, even though you're all going to make the same choice, oddly enough. I think of it that way, that it's like it's the obvious choice once you see God in all his majesty, but it's still a choice. And what this
Hmm.
world is making that choice before you get to, before the answer, you're confined by the answer being obvious, right?
Before we go be robots.
Yeah.
Proverbs 3:5. Do you remember? Are you familiar with that one? The
I
do
I
not
did
lean on
not
your own
memorize by
understanding.
numbers. I don't do
You're good.
that.
You're
So
good.
yeah,
You're
which
good.
one?
It's
Yeah.
me neither. That's why I write
Yeah.
everything down.
Yeah.
Proverbs 3:5 it's essentially the verse that tells you to not lean on your own understanding. So to me, that is robot status. That is mindless. Do not lean on your own mind. There is a better mind out there. So that to me is robot status. The
Do
the
you do
whole no free will in heaven,
do you
the
do that
slaves
on
in heaven.
quantum mechanics? Like, do you understand quantum mechanics, or did you
Fuck no.
rely on the guy that? Yeah,
I don't understand any
in
of
your
that.
own life, you are relying on other people.
Hmm.
I think part of that
Well, not
statement.
really. I mean, I don't claim anything about quantum mechanics except for I don't understand it and I haven't really looked into it. I'm not going to.
You're using it right now to talk to me. You are relying on it. You trust that it's going to work when you press the button. You this that like there is
Hmm,
an element of relying on it. Now I understand what you're saying, that you didn't do a great deep dive, and you
hmm.
didn't put some sort of metaphysical trust into these people. I
No
understand that,
metaphysical
but
anything.
yeah, but but conceptually, our understanding of the universe is
Hmm.
really coming from other people. And as they say, unless you look through the telescope, what the astronomer sees through the telescope is nothing but trust on your part, right? There
I
is
don't
that
lead my
element of
life by
that.
it though. That's different. It's a little
Well,
bit different. I don't be like, oh, there's 10 planets or no Jupiter or what is it? Pluto. Pluto's not a planet
yeah,
anymore.
not a
Pluto
point.
is a
Yeah,
planet. I don't care. I could care less. I mean, honestly.
yeah, but again, you do use a computer, relying on it. You make
Yeah.
decisions based on it. I tell you what the law is, and you say, okay, I won't go violate that. You're
Hmm.
relying on me to tell you what the law was.
Hmm.
There are different elements in your life where you rely on the weather forecast. You do affect some pieces of your life. You're saying you don't make your metaphysical decision based on it, right? I
Like any
understand that, but
metaphysical.
you exactly, but you're not making you're choosing not to make a metaphysical decision, I guess is how I should word it. But you are the
Uh,
conception that you're having of the universe
hmm.
is maybe you're not making it on that. in your own mind. But I would say you're still relying on an awful lot of predecessors and giants that stood before you to think these things through, right?
I wouldn't say I'm relying on it. The system works like we discussed earlier. Sometimes
Yeah, exactly.
it's just what it is, and I use it. I don't rely or trust it. Essentially, no, I definitely don't trust it.
Yeah,
I don't trust this thing at
yeah,
all. Like right now, I'm gonna have to go double check, make sure everything recorded, the sound was fine, because it
exactly.
likes to change all that shenanigans. So no, I don't really trust it. But the metaphysical part, fundamental. I'm very curious about this word. I've forgot the actual definition. The branch of philosophy studying the fundamental nature of reality, existence, and being, focusing on concepts beyond the physical observation. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So more of the supernatural stuff.
Well, yeah, if you're talking religion, yes.
Yeah.
If you're
Okay.
talking philosophy, you actually believe a million things that aren't physically provable, such as why do you ask somebody to say, why do you say please pass the salt rather than just say pass the salt? The answer is because you actually think there's a person in there who cares whether you say please, unlike a robot who would, who can't take offense to the fact that you order it around.
I still say
It,
please and thank you to AI.
it
You
so do
never know.
I. I am constantly apologizing to the AI. I'm sorry, I forgot to include. I forgot to include the attachment. Can you please
Yeah.
rerun? I'm like killing
Don't
myself,
be mad at
feeding
me in
my.
the future.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, you in philosophy, you would say that there actually is a million other metaphysical things, but you're right. In a religious context,
No,
it's a
no.
supernatural.
And I don't
Right?
use that. Yeah, I definitely don't
Yeah,
use that
yeah.
for the system there. So as far as the mindlessness, when we get to heaven, yes, we are going to be slaves to Yahweh, and but we're going to like it. Like having $1 million. It's going to be like having $1 million.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why do you think that?
Um, for the moment, I think that because that's the biblical story, that's the view of it. I have trouble
Hmm.
envisioning it like anybody
Yeah.
else. I kind of wonder what this is going to look like. I kind of wonder if anybody can envision it. Like, it's said to be greater than anything, etc. So maybe it's what is that, 2001 or is it 2010 where the guy ends with the vision of the stars or whatever? The
2000. Oh
movie.
yeah, huh?
Yeah. I kind
Yeah,
of think it's going to be like that of like, oh, that's not remotely what I thought it would be like. It's
yeah.
kind of what I'm
Yeah.
imagining. But conceptually, it is I believe the Bible is quite clear that if there is a heaven, that's what it is. It is everybody following God's will.
Hmm.
Um, but it's that you want to follow the will, just like you want to give your kids the candy that they're asking for. Like, it's not
Oh.
slavery in the same sense, right? It's a different thing. Yeah, yeah. Maybe candy's a bad
Yeah.
example. Depends. But the vegetables that they're
There you
not
go. There you
asking
go.
for. Wait a minute. No. Um, yeah.
But the concept itself, if we think about it, we try and rationalize the different things we know about heaven. There's not going to be any nighttime right off the bat. I like the nighttime. I enjoy the no sun being out and the stars and all that shenanigans. I enjoy that. So right off the bat, that's a ding. That's a red
But
flag for me.
that's the kind of thing that I actually expect when we see it. We go, "Oh my God, the stars," or whatever his exact line is. Oh, wow, so many stars.
Yeah.
You're yes, it said something about the night, but that's not really what it meant.
Uh,
You're going to
uh,
think of the whole world in a different way, and like it's just that stuff's not like
interesting.
I'm not into the 6,000-year-old Earth, and I'm not into discussing the
Yeah.
dimensions of the temple in heaven or whatever. Like to me, that is an example of human beings trying to express the unexpressible,
Hmm.
trying to what the ineffable,
Hmm.
uh, that kind of thing is that to me is what that stuff is.
What about the gold? Do you think it's going to be a lot of gold and jewels and pearls on
That's
the
the sort
gates
of
and that?
that's the sort of thing that I'm saying. Like, yeah, the guy at the time writing that thought of that as the greatest thing in the world. Like that's his view, and that's an attempt to express it in his
Hmm.
language that
Hmm.
doesn't even translate into my language. I've
Hmm.
seen those solid gold toilets. Like, my God, do you really want one of those?
I don't
Like,
understand. It's so
yeah,
ugly.
no, no, um, in fact, near where I grew up is Mike Tyson's mansion. Did you ever hear about this place?
Mm-mm.
So he made all this money and he builds this mansion outside of Youngstown, Ohio. No one has ever bought the mansion. It's so horrible, but it's
No.
got all that stuff throughout it. And anybody who's ever toured it just laughs at how tacky it is and astonishingly bad. So anyway, I think the
Uh,
gold in it is kind of that nature. It was somebody who thought of that as the greatest thing, so he used
hmm.
that word to express it.
That
But
makes sense.
that's not the reality of it. Like that's
Gotcha.
different, right?
What about the
Um,
sadness?
the sadness of heaven or
No
the
sadness, the no sadness in heaven thing.
yeah. Again, it's a concept I find hard to understand. Like
Yeah.
I sort of like, okay, I guess that's what you're telling me, but I find it hard to believe that there's people rotting in heaven, hell in this belief system, and I'm not going to be sad about it, particularly if I
Right.
knew those people.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
what is that? And I don't know. I don't know what the answers to those are.
Hmm.
I point people to a weird book,
Hmm.
which I no one seems to remember this concept, but 100 and some years ago, it was a huge topic being debated. The book is called "On the Fewness of the Saved," and it
Hmm.
is debating exactly how many people go to heaven based on the Bible, right? Like, are we talking about a small fraction of humanity, or are we
Uh-huh.
talking about a large fraction of humanity? And anyway, I read that book and that those little debates as I was going through all of this, and I
Hmm.
pretty much concluded I don't know. But it is fascinating to wonder, like, are most of the people I have met in my life going to be in hell or in
Hmm.
heaven? Because none of them believe what I believe exactly, right? Even
Yeah.
those that are in the same church. But then you go through like a spectrum of, well, are they Christian? Are they religious? Were they decent people? Were they, like we're going like, way out, do they believe
Lukewarm.
they're Sikhs, they're
Hmm.
set, they're atheists, they're like, where are we on all of this? Like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about, but it's sort of, again, I view it as a concept that people don't know and
Yeah.
that it's not the right question to be asking at this time and place. It's kind of like asking questions in kindergarten, like, we'll explain it to you in a few years, kid.
Well, I'm just going off of what we have. We're all going off of
Yeah,
what we have, and
exactly.
what I would be helpful, I find would be helpful if God could, maybe explain it a little better for
I
everybody. That would be
totally, and I
something.
100% am often asking myself, where are you to put some better guide rails out there for people or whatever? Like, where is
Mm.
that? Is
Yeah.
part of the question of this. I come
Mm.
back to, well, he's got a plan, and it's not for me to understand the plan at this point because I'm a kindergartner. But
Uh,
man, would I like to graduate and
man.
ask a few questions and get a few answers. But
Yeah.
again, real life is you're never going to understand anything, even the technology you're using today or anything else. You're not. We survive in that environment in context beyond religion, without complaining too much. So why are we so demanding in religion? I guess is where maybe I don't know.
Well, the difference, I think, with the religion part is the Bible specifically claims that in a couple spots that God will teach you unknowable things. You
Yep.
just ask, and He'll be like, "Oh, that's the answer's B." I mean, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we can't get these hard answers from the Christian God, and if we do, it's
As
usually
to
turned out to
yeah,
be false or fake or something.
exactly. I mean, I would say that you can get some answers from it. You're not getting all the answers you want, but there is some that would, I believe would come to people if you accept God and um,
Hmm.
accept that parameter. You see the world in a different space. That goes back to what we were originally talking about how to explain the craziness of human behavior. I find that I achieved a better understanding. Now, am I right or wrong about that? I don't know, but that's my view
Hmm.
of what happened to me. So I am accepting of the idea that you can gain a greater understanding.
Hmm. But there's still a lot of I don't knows. That's what I'm seeing
Absolutely.
here. Is it
100%.
is it
Yeah.
truly an understanding, or is it just a replacement or a filling of a gap of knowledge there until we can find some other answers?
Isn't that what science is? A better understanding than we had
But that's
yesterday, but
testable
not
though.
necessarily.
We can test things. That's what we do with science. We test, but we can't test God. That's the difference, is we can't actually test that metaphysical world.
You can't, well, but again, you asked at the very beginning, and I am saying that in my own testing, crappy as it is,
Hmm.
acknowledging all of that, I conducted my own experiment. I feel that I have a better ability to understand my fellow human beings and predict behaviors and deal with
Hmm.
their problems through this.
Hmm.
That's quasi scientific. I understand it's not in a laboratory, but neither is economics and most
Hmm.
biology. Like, I you know, we call things science that are not done in laboratories. I did something that's not done in a laboratory, but it is an experiment, and I felt that it achieved results. So
Yeah.
for me that
It
worked.
filled that gap in your knowledge
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. What are your doubts, Matthew? You mentioned doubts a couple times here. What are the main things you're doubting or have doubted?
Um, yeah. I just revert back to my old self, I think is what happens. Is it I
Hmm.
revert back to um you know, uh sort of along the lines of what you're saying, like why would God let this happen?
Hmm.
Why would people I know be burning in hell when they, if that's the end result,
Yeah.
etc. If they're not burning in hell, what was the point of me going to church? Like those sorts of things. And then I remind myself, well, God has a plan. He wants us to go through
Hmm.
the plan. And if you believe that, you should voluntarily go through the plan, not have to be dragged by the
Hmm.
throat into church on Sunday. So then I drag myself by the throat into church on Sunday and try to do that. But it's that those are probably more of the doubts that I have. Is along that nature of is this really the explanation of the universe, as opposed to because I'm assuming your question would be, do I have doubts about
Hmm.
whether evolution occurred or things like that. My view is that stuff's more allegorical. The specifics are more uh, a relic of the times that they were written in than the
Hmm.
cosmic truth of the universe, right? So
Why are we trusting the plan?
again, my own view is that as I look back, if I think there was a plan, I look back on things and I start to see the parameters of a plan. Not as we said, not the full
Hmm.
plan. I don't know the whole thing, but I see places where it does seem like there was a plan and it did save me from certain things, etc. I mean, the whole
Hmm.
question of how on earth I came to be writing this
Hmm.
book, right? If you asked me what I was doing in my retirement, this was not it. So how did that come about? And it's like, well, was that part of God's plan? Maybe.
Uh,
I had a unique skill set. He dropped me into one weird spot to be in at a particular time and see something and be able to
hmm.
point out something. So maybe. Now, could you say that that's idiocy? How could you see that as a plan? On the right day, you'll convince me of that. Don't worry. But like if I'm on my good days, I'm saying, well, that looks like a plan to me. And on my bad days, I'm wondering whether that really was a plan. I do have a
Yeah.
background in statistics, so I do find it comical when people try to argue about miracles or whatever from statistics. So that's a whole nother story and topic. But I don't, I don't subscribe to that particular view of the world, the statistical view of miracles. So I don't,
Yeah.
don't ask me to defend that. But
Well, the flood. Do you think the flood was part of his plan?
So again, I don't necessarily believe in the literal flood as the
Hmm.
6,000 year earthers conceive of it, etc.
Okay.
But I do think there was a flood. There was a at least a regional flood. There was a concept of a flood. There's something. If maybe it's an
Hmm.
allegory, maybe it's a remnant passed down from thousands of years of humanity from something that had happened far
Hmm.
earlier. The tribal legend, if you want. Don't know.
Yeah.
But the concept of it, yeah. I mean, the allegorical concept, certainly.
So maybe a local flood sent by God, or just who controls the weather there as far as that
I
story?
think again, these are human terms being anthropomorphizing a God that doesn't operate at all like we think he does. So
Hmm.
it's the idea that he sends the flood rather than that the flood was always coming from the very beginning of time is, a distinction without a
Hmm.
difference to God. Like, it's he created the universe.
Hmm.
It has its parameters, and some of those parameters were God determining that something was going to happen, and some of them are
Hmm.
allowing it to happen. One way or the other, the flood was coming, and this is what was going to occur, right?
Interesting. So God set up a system. Let's just say the flood thingy was
Yep.
the thingy. So God set up a system in which this flood is one domino, a big domino here.
Yep.
But he had to set up all these little dominoes in order for that to happen. So did God set up all the dominoes and then push the one in the beginning to set it all off so we can get to the flood, so we can get to the Jesus, so we can get to the
Yeah.
tribulation, all that shenanigans?
If I my again superficial understanding of how God did this. If
Yeah.
it wasn't that flood, it would have been another flood. If it was, if
Hmm.
something was going to come, that was going to happen. It's just a question of when, where, and how. And he sets the system in process, and that occurs. I again,
Hmm.
I usually relate these things to other experiences in my life, but the quest to find randomness in computers is
Hmm.
actually fascinating. You need random numbers. And how do you generate those random numbers from a system that operates is kind of a fascinating question. You can buy books on this and try to understand it. If you look online, one of the very best ways that they determine randomness has to do with the atmosphere, and they're pulling things out of the atmosphere. But it's really hard to get a robot to act randomly.
Hmm.
It's not, it's kind of a bizarre concept. And when I think of that, this creational concept of creating a universe that has this randomness in it, I'm often drawn back to that discussion of randomness in computers and how you get there. And it's, to me,
Hmm.
it's something we don't really understand, but it is God setting up a system that
Hmm.
is both moving towards something inevitably, but the details maybe were not set in stone.
Hmm.
And that's the details that worked out, and here we are.
Hmm.
That's how I kind of see it.
To me, it just doesn't make any sense for a rational, loving being to set up a world in which, number one, the suffering, and number two, the weather patterns that would come through and destroy people, destroy lives. Um, it's weird to me. I don't see that as a rational idea, especially
I,
knowing exactly how things would turn out, you know.
Yeah, this is to me, and this is where I get kind of annoyed with people because every once in a while I'll
Mm,
say I have doubts, and like somebody's yelling at me, some Christians yelling at me for having doubts or whatever. Like, if you can watch a typhoon kill a hundred
mm,
thousand people and
yeah,
not have doubts,
yeah.
you're not human anymore.
You're
Like, whatever that is a
the rational
psychological,
elevator. It
yeah.
doesn't reach the top.
The,
That's where
the
I'm at.
psychological problems have set in. Like, there's something going on. Like, to me, that is exactly the question. I understand. I'm not,
Mm,
I'm not here to tell you that that doesn't raise doubts in me. It's just that
mm,
on my good days, I say, well, there's still a plan. On my bad days, I wonder. And, that's where it
yeah.
is. And, even the Bible,
Mm,
there's the babies that are killed by Herod, um, rather than spared by God or whatever. Herod comes around stabbing the children, trying to kill Jesus, his sons as soldiers. Like, what is that?
mm.
And you hear different people try to explain it or whatever. My view is if you don't have doubts and wonder about that, you're
You-
again not human.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not just the other people that God allows to kill innocents. It's the innocents that God himself slaughters in the Bible for no good reason. And I can't think of a good reason to slaughter the innocent, but God sure thinks he has lots of good ideas to slaughter or reasons to slaughter the innocent, and one including his son. For some weird reason, now he needs bloodshed for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Another weird reason, not a good one. It's weird.
I don't know, but that's a longer topic. But
That is a
yeah.
longer topic
Yeah.
for the next show for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't find any of that rational or logical
Yeah.
or needed. But anyway, so the fact that God does do the slaughtering of the innocents, how do you rationalize that part of it?
Yeah, so again, I go back to the people, these people are anthropomorphizing and thinking of God as like an individual making an in the clutch, in the moment
Hmm.
decision when this stuff might have been set in process long beforehand, might
Hmm.
be part of this randomness. I just think that there's a whole lot of trying to conceive of God as you when God is not us. He's something else, and that
Huh.
is complicating our ability to understand it, is where I come to. So again, if you set up a wave generator
Hmm.
at one of those resorts, right? It's going to generate waves. I presume that the engineering is constantly dealing with the fact that it generated a wave that was way stronger than was expected, right? That they're
Huh.
constantly tinkering with the thing and,
Okay.
and fixing things. Like I can see that you could set a machine into process and still have randomness that would cause these sorts of things. Again, that's a bad understanding of God, but that's at least taking me a step further of understanding what he might be,
Well, let's
is
take that
conceiving
wave
of it
pool
that way.
analogy and let's further it. I'm setting up the wave pool, and I know 2 weeks from now, when I set the wave pool at a certain level, a child is going to drown. So, and I know if I set the wave pool a little bit different, 10 children are going to die. But if I set it a different way, nobody's going to die. Now, what God does is he just lets it go towards the way he knows is going to kill the children. That's the difference. That's what I see. Is God is in control
Yeah,
of that system that he created.
I would say that that's a bad analogy at the very end where
I
you
love it.
talk about how there's a system which would create the waves and no one would die.
Yes.
I think God would say that that's not possible. The way to
Wow.
avoid it is not to have waves. In your analogy, I think
Hmm.
it would be more that God is saying He wanted individuals, He wanted people, and in
Hmm.
order to have souls and individuals that were not Him, not robots, to have separate things, He set into system a wave that unfortunately would cause some deaths. But that
Hmm.
in order, it's
Selfish.
swimming pools are dangerous, yet people keep putting them in their yard, right? Like I think it's that sort of thing that I want my kid to be able to swim and enjoy swimming. I know there's a risk, but I'm willing to do it. I think it's kind of the same thing from God's perspective
Yeesh.
of saying this might happen or this will happen. He knows it's going to happen to some. Same with swimming pools. A certain number of people are going to die. Fact. Not like that is not a
But not if I'm an all-powerful God and all-knowing. I can create a
all
system in
power.
which people wouldn't drown, right?
That's what I think you could create that system, but without the free will and without the souls. I think
Mm,
that in my conception. And
yeah.
again, it goes back to whether God had any say in how He created the universe. But I think He
Hmm.
is. I think of all powerful as all powerful to a point, but not to creating something that is separate from God. That
Mm.
would be a soul, would be an individual. He had to create some randomness in the system, for lack of a better term. But it probably when you get to
Weird.
the next
So weird.
world, yeah, when you get to the next world, you probably won't call it random. You'll see the whole big picture, right?
Well, that's
But
wishful
in our
thinking,
world,
but
yeah, exactly. I understand. But in the our world, my view of it is we don't really understand it, but that's the analogy. Is
definitely don't
it's
understand.
yeah,
I love it though. Thank you for trying. I appreciate
ah,
the effort.
yeah, exactly.
But I
Yeah.
mean, let's end it here with this concept, this idea of God wanting to create people. That to me sounds like a very selfish thing. And then the fact that he has to have the suffering and people are going to die and suffer horribly with his system that he wants to create because he wants to create people. Well, the Bible says he creates them because he wants worship. I think that's weird and selfish and egotistical and monstrous. So
Only because you're not God. But go on.
so why do you think he wanted to create people, knowing what would happen? What was his good reason for doing such a thing?
Yeah, so again, I would start at the very beginning. Is that selfish to create people who are going to frolic in heaven for the rest of eternity? They're going to be happy with it. He has created a good thing, but
Small group.
well,
The small group over here are going to be happy, and then the rest of everybody else is going to torture,
exactly.
suffer, and
My own view is it'll only be me because anybody who disagrees with me,
Ah.
but anyway, maybe there's somebody else in the future who will agree with me. But anyway, as you say, but there's a group, and for those people, it is wonderful, right?
Mm.
Again, goes back to could he create that without these other problems? I don't know that he could with free will, with
Mm.
trying to create souls.
Mm.
That's my view of it. Is that's part of the system. That's part of what it had to be.
Mm.
Which goes back to all the very beginning philosophy debates of do we exist? Do we have free will?
Mm.
What does it mean to be all powerful? Can God make a burrito so big he can't eat
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
All those things. But my
Lots of
answer would
limits on
be,
God.
yeah, my belief is that this is the system. If you wanted those souls, this is what it
Mm.
would be.
Mm.
That's my own
Mm.
belief. But
Well, I think it's a crappy system. But that's just my opinion. So, and God doesn't listen to my opinion.
when I am
apparently.
staring down that tidal wave coming, I might agree with you. So we will see how that goes.
Agree.
Yeah.
Awesome, Matthew. Thank you so much for your time, man. Go ahead and close us out with where can we find you and any closing thoughts?
Yeah, canoncrossfire.com. It's Canon Crossfire, as in the canon of scripture, CANON, one N, canoncrossfire.com. I have a free preview, as I say, that would make the point. You'll get the point. The book is more fun for giving to others, so by all means do that. I'm on Twitter. Happy to engage with people on Twitter. I have a blog. My book, I have all these friends who can't spare the time to read a book, so it's available on audiobook if anyone wants it. So check out the website. It'll send you to the cheapest place to get any of the books and any versions of the book, and go from there. So God bless, and happy to talk to you. Happy to shoot the crap.
Thanks, Matthew. No, this has been fun. I appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime, man.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Take care. We'll keep in touch. That's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find all things BSW related on the show's website at thebiblesayswhat.com. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to thebiblesayswhat.com and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will get you early access to each new episode on Wednesdays instead of Sundays. You can also catch me live on the show's TikTok and YouTube channel every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. PST. Links are in the show notes. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcasts, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly share and review the show?